Welcome to the deep dive. Today, wow, we've got an incredible stack of sources here. Really diverse stuff.
Yeah, it looks great.
We're going to pull you into some pretty surprising connections, I think. We're talking everything from how AI is fundamentally reshaping careers to the intense global economic rivalries playing out and even, digging into what makes a brand really tick.
It's going to be fascinating.
Get ready for a deep dive that promises to be, well, a real eye-opener.
And our mission, as always, is to sift through all this material, all this rich, diverse stuff, and really pull out the most important bits of knowledge.
Right.
We're aiming to give you that shortcut, to being truly well-informed, connecting dots you might not expect across tech, governance, global business.
Finding those aha moments.
Exactly. Those moments that really show the profound shifts happening everywhere. Hashtag the evolving human in the AI era.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First big shift our sources highlight. The attitude and usage researcher, the ANU researcher. They're not really a technologist in the old sense, are they? So what are they becoming now with AI everywhere?
That's the crux of it, really. Historically, ANU researchers were all about the field work, the surveys, and then manually crunching all that data, spreadsheets, maybe some staff software.
Right. Interpreting human behavior was their superpower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now AI is stepping in. It's automating a lot of those, let's call them lower level tasks. Data collection, transcription, even basic sentiment analysis, finding initial patterns.
So it frees them up.
Precisely. It frees the researcher to become more of a technology-enabled strategist. That's the term emerging.
Okay, so AI isn't replacing them, it's elevating the role. It sounds like they're being asked to drive the tech, not just react to it.
You got it. We're kind of redefining technologist here. It now includes these really strategic users. Think of the ANU researcher as the one driving the car to its destination. AI is the powerful engine, yeah. But the researcher is steering. Their core expertise, still human behavior. But now, understanding AI's capabilities, its limits, that's mandatory.
And being data literate.
Absolutely. Data literacy to ask the right questions and, crucially, to validate what the AI spits out. It's a huge shift from data collector to, well, insight accelerator.
That's a really clear way to put it. And speaking of AI proficiency, if an ANU expert isn't a coder, does that proficiency extend to something super specialized like prompt engineering? Is that, a realistic leap?
Oh, absolutely realistic. And it's happening. Many ANU experts are already making that leap. Because the core skills for good prompt engineering, things like logical reasoning, critical thinking, problem solving.
Skills they already have.
Exactly. Deep domain expertise, language proficiency. These are already fundamental to what good ANU researchers do. It's really about strategic communication with a machine.
Right.
Translating those nuanced human needs into instructions the AI can actually work with effectively. It's not about writing Python code.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If you're going to be a prompt engineer, do you need to learn a whole bunch of different AI models? Seems like a new one pops up every week.
You absolutely do. Yeah, that's a core part of this new skill set. These LLM AI models, the large language models, they're definitely not one size fits all. They vary a lot. Architecture, the data they were trained on, their specific strengths. No single model is best for every single task.
Right.
So a skilled prompt engineer, they need to be a master of a diverse set of tools, really.
Okay.
Understanding, task specialization,
Yeah.
the little nuances of each model.
Right.
And yeah, the cost and efficiency trade-offs too. That's key.
And what about platforms like Parallels AI, the ones designed to sort of unify access to multiple models? Do they simplify this cognitive load entirely?
Well, platforms like Parallels AI are great. They really are. They streamline access, give you one interface from models like GPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever, makes the workflow smoother. But they don't eliminate the cognitive load of choosing the right tool for the job. They simplify the logistics, sure, but the human expertise, selecting the best model based on its specialization, performance, cost, that remains critical.
So you still need to know which hammer to use, basically.
Exactly. You still need to know which hammer for which nail. The platform just puts all the hammers in one toolbox.
Fascinating. Okay, so individuals are adapting. Let's shift gears a bit. How do these tech changes ripple outwards? How do they impact higher education, specifically MBAs? What does this all mean for people aiming for business leadership?
Yeah, it's a big impact. Our sources show a really clear trend, especially in the U.S. and China's IT sectors. There's less demand now for, let's say, traditional MBAs.
Okay.
They're really seeking a hybrid skill set, someone who blends that business acumen with strong technical expertise. They call them product-minded leaders.
Product-minded leaders. I like that.
Yeah. China's tech sector, for example, they heavily prioritize people with master's degrees in engineering, data science, AI for their leadership roles, less focus on the general MBA.
So it's not just about leading strategy anymore. It's about leading with the technology baked in.
Exactly. The really valued skills for MBAs now, things like data analytics, AI and machine learning know-how, product management, strategic technology management, complex problem solving.
Whole package.
Right. The goal is to hire business leaders who are also fundamentally technologists. And U.S. business schools, they're responding. They're creating these STEM-designated MBA programs.
I've heard about those.
Yeah, they integrate data analytics, AI, digital transformation right into the curriculum. It meets that employer demand. Plus, there's a crucial visa benefit for international students, that 24-month OPT extension.
Now, you've mentioned before, there's sometimes been this historical bias towards marketing in U.S. business schools. Is that still the case, or is it shifting?
Well, there definitely was a significant historical bias towards marketing, especially thinking back to the 20th century mass production era, Kellogg and places like that. But there's been a profound shift towards finance, yes, but increasingly towards STEM now.
Okay.
And this brings up what some sources call the innovation versus capture problem. It's quite interesting.
Innovation versus capture. Explain that.
So marketing traditionally focused heavily on value capture.
Yeah.
Optimizing existing products, finding markets, pricing, promotion.
Pitching the most of what you have.
Right, whereas STEM disciplines are more focused on value creation, inventing entirely new products, new services, new ways of doing things.
Okay.
And the core insight here, the warning perhaps, is that an over-reliance on just capturing value without enough focus on creating new value, well, that can lead to stifled dynamism. Productivity lags, you lose your competitive edge.
If you're not equipped to create the new stuff, you eventually fall behind.
Precisely. You're not building the next car. You might just be stuck trying to sell buggies in the EV age. It's a stark reality for some institutions, yeah.
So digging into that a bit more. Product, one of the 4 Ps of marketing historically. Was it less critical than place and promotion in U.S. business schools and maybe even businesses themselves?
Historically, yes, often. Product was frequently seen as engineering's job. Marketing took ownership of promotion advertising, brand management, and place distribution, retailing.
But that's changing.
Oh, dramatically. Why? Well, think about it. Instant digital feedback from customers. The massive rise of product management as a discipline. The CEO of the product idea.
Right.
And the whole subscription economy, where the product quality and experience directly drives retention and revenue. Product is king now in many ways.
So are traditional MBAs equipped for this?
The truth is, most traditional MBAs in the U.S. are not really equipped to manage modern product development effectively. It increasingly requires real STEM skills.
That's a big mismatch.
It is. And it's forcing this curriculum transformation towards hybrid roles, technical product management. Yeah. And honestly, many academics at U.S. business schools are still perhaps more qualified and comfortable teaching place and promotion than modern tech-driven product development. It's a transition in progress.
Okay, so we've talked about this innovation imperative for individuals, for businesses, this need to create new value. But that whole challenge, that innovation versus capture thing, it's not just for companies, is it? It plays out on a huge scale for entire nations.
Absolutely.
And it's often shaped by something really fundamental, like a nation's approach to, say, corruption.
Yep.
Our sources, like the Corruption Perceptions Index, they consistently show Western nations, Scandinavia, Germany, the U.S., with way lower perceived corruption than, say, India and China. How do we explain that stark difference?
Well, the core difference really lies in these deep-seated cultural foundations. Western nations are largely what you'd call rule-based cultures, meaning they emphasize universal laws, transparency, trust in the system itself. Think Scandinavia's high social trust, Germany's strong legal institutions. India and China, however, are historically more relationship-based.
Okay.
Here, loyalty and obligation to family, friends, superiors can sometimes, override universal laws or procedures. Think of facilitation payments in India for permits, or China's Guangxi building personal relationships for contracts.
The economic impact.
It's significant. The deep dive takeaway here is pretty clear. Low corruption attracts stable foreign investment. It fosters competitive business. High corruption, it basically acts like a tax on economic activity. It siphons off funds, discourages that crucial foreign direct investment.
Okay, but let's push back a bit. What about crony capitalism in G7 nations? Aren't there always allegations that even these cleaner Western nations have their own, maybe more subtle forms of corruption?
Oh, absolutely. And the data backs it up, particularly regarding rising income inequality. It's less overt, maybe, than direct bribery, but crony capitalism is a real thing.
How does it manifest?
Well, several ways. There's the revolving door, people moving between top government jobs and lucrative private sector roles. Think a treasury secretary joining a major bank.
Right.
Then there's lobbying. Billions spent by corporations and wealthy individuals to influence legislation. Think pharma companies lobbying against drug price negotiation.
Give special interests a huge voice.
Exactly. And complex tax policies with loopholes that disproportionately benefit corporations and the ultra-rich, offshore havens, that sort of thing. Plus, deregulation, especially in finance. Remember 2008? The public often bears the cost of crises, while a connected elite gets protected.
So it's a system where the rules favor the connected.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It allows a wealthy, connected elite to kind of set the rules of the game, leading to wealth concentrating at the very top. It's a subtle, but yeah, deeply corrosive form of corruption.
Makes perfect sense. Now let's shift to population dynamics, population density. When does that become a liability instead of an asset for a nation? Is there a tipping point?
It's not really a fixed number, like X people per square mile. It's more tied to a region's carrying capacity. And there's this idea called the optimum population theory.
Okay.
Basically, density is an asset when you can leverage it, economies of scale and production, a big market, fostering innovation in cities. It becomes a liability when it overwhelms the system.
Overwhelms how?
Strain on infrastructure, roads, water, power, environmental degradation, high unemployment if there aren't enough jobs, social issues, public health challenges, when the density outstrips the capacity to manage it well.
So how do India and China fit into this, comparing their post-independence economic growth with their population densities?
It's a fascinating comparison. Both started with immense poverty and very high population density after the 1940s.
Right.
China, under Mao, actually had a pro-natalist policy initially, leading to a rapid boom. But disastrous policies like the Great Leap Forward meant that population often strained resources. They struggled to keep per capita GDP growth ahead of population growth.
India.
India, under Nehruvian socialism, also saw a population boom. And high density often was a liability, contributing to unemployment, stretched resources, what was sometimes called the slow Hindu rate of growth.
Then came the divergence.
Exactly. The Great Divergence really kicked off from the 1980s onwards. China implemented reform and opening up under Deng Xiaoping, combined with the strict one-child policy.
The policy change was key.
Huge. Suddenly, that dense population, especially concentrated in coastal cities with new infrastructure, became a massive asset for export-oriented manufacturing. Cheap, abundant labor. That created a powerful demographic dividend.
And India's path.
India liberalized later, 1991, and crucially, no strict population control like China's. So density often remained a challenge, a large informal sector, persistent poverty, inadequate infrastructure compared to China's massive build-out. India's growth has been driven more by services and its skilled workforce, not manufacturing on that same vast scale.
Okay, building on that, can the sheer size of a population become a liability for democracy?
Yes, it absolutely can, particularly when it puts a strain on key democratic institutions.
How so?
Well, think about representation. If one representative serves millions of people, how effective can accountability be? Civic participation can feel diluted.
Makes sense.
It also puts immense strain on governance and public services. Massive bureaucracies can become inefficient, slow, even prone to corruption. And if the government fails to provide adequate services for this huge population, that can lead to political instability.
And maybe populism.
Yes, that's another risk. Large, diverse populations can lead to increased factionalism, different groups pulling in different directions. It makes consensus really hard to achieve, and that environment can sometimes favor populist leaders who might promise simple solutions but potentially erode democratic norms. The tyranny of the majority becomes a concern.
Is that increased factionalism in politics? Is it anything like market segmentation in business? I mean, they both involve dividing a larger group, right?
That's an interesting way to think about it. But fundamentally, no, they're very different beasts. Factionalism is almost always a liability for politics. It breeds internal conflict, gridlock, instability. It weakens the whole. Market segmentation, though, That's generally an asset for business.
Right.
It's a strategic division of customers to operate more efficiently, tailor products better, build stronger relationships within those segments, totally different goals, different outcomes, different underlying philosophy, really. One divides to conquer a market, the other risks dividing and weakening a nation.
Well put. Okay, now, seeing China's incredible economic ascent, does that suggest that maybe democracy, as practiced in India, isn't the best fit? That perhaps a stronger central rule might be more effective given India's challenges?
Ah, that's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? It's a really complex debate, fundamentally about efficiency versus freedom.
What are the main arguments on each side?
Well, the arguments for a strong central rule, like China's model, usually point to the speed of economic development. They can push through massive infrastructure projects without messy democratic processes slowing things down. Military modernization can be rapid due to centralized resource allocation. And policymaking can be decisive. Think the one-child policy or even their strict COVID lockdowns. Speed and decisiveness.
Okay, and the arguments for democracy, the India model?
Democracy's strengths lie in political stability and peaceful transitions of power, which is huge. It provides mechanisms to manage immense diversity, giving regional groups, minority voices, a platform and recourse through the legal system. And arguably, the free exchange of ideas and a robust private sector foster resilience and long-term innovation, even if progress seems slower sometimes.
So different paths, different trade-offs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
China's model arguably achieved faster growth, but at the cost of individual freedoms and political rights. India's democracy, while maybe slower and messier, offers stability, inclusivity, and the rule of law for its incredibly diverse population. They represent fundamentally different visions of what progress means.
Let's stick with India for a moment. We see high immigration rates, particularly of skilled people. Does that point towards a sort of broader dissatisfaction among the electorate with the democratic system itself?
I'd say it points more towards significant economic and social dissatisfaction, rather than rejection of democracy per se. It's mostly driven by push factors.
Like what?
Lack of enough high-quality job opportunities, especially for skilled graduates, high cost of living in major cities, the desire for better quality higher education abroad, which we touched on, sometimes social or cultural factors too. It's usually more about micro-level dissatisfaction with personal prospects and opportunities within India, not necessarily a macro-level rejection of the political system.
Okay, so if it's not about ditching democracy, what's a real structural solution for rebuilding, let's say, brand India, making it a place people want to stay and build?
Yeah, rebuilding brand India isn't just about marketing slogans. It needs deep foundational reforms. I'd probably highlight 3 key pillars based on our sources.
Go on.
First, institutional credibility. That means things like judicial reform for faster, more transparent justice, simplifying bureaucracy, making it easier to do business, stable tax and financial systems, building trust in the institutions.
Okay, pillar 1, trustworthy institutions.
Second, social cohesion and human development. This is huge. Universal access to genuinely high-quality public education, from primary school up, sustainable urban planning, tackling environmental issues, strengthening social safety nets, investing in people.
Pillar 2, investing in people and society.
And third, innovation and global leadership, really boosting R&D investment, which we'll probably talk more about. Fostering a culture that encourages risk-taking and entrepreneurship. Promoting made in India, not just for manufacturing, but for genuine innovation.
Pillar 3, innovation. So institutions, people, innovation. Sounds foundational.
Exactly. It's about building the substance, not just the image.
Now, a slightly controversial angle some sources might hint at. Is there any basis to suggest a DNA or IQ difference, explaining the performance gap we sometimes see between India and China or India and the West?
Let me be absolutely clear on this. Categorically, no. There is zero credible scientific evidence to support any notion of inherent genetic or IQ differences between these large populations explaining national performance gaps.
So what does explain the differences?
It's overwhelmingly down to environmental factors, political systems, economic strategies, historical context, and crucially, investment in human capital, things like education and health. It's nurture, not nature, on this scale.
Okay, but could poor governance indirectly lead to lower average IQ scores in a population? Not genetically, but environmentally.
Indirectly, yes, that's a valid connection. Poor governance often fails to provide the essential building blocks for cognitive development.
Such as?
Quality education, adequate nutrition, accessible healthcare, safe environments, basic stability. All these things are crucial for brain development, especially in childhood. If a government fails on these fronts, it can hinder the cognitive potential of its population and prevent what's known as the Flynn effect.
The Flynn effect.
Yeah, that's the observed long-term trend of rising average IQ scores in many parts of the world over generations, largely attributed to improvements in exactly those factors.
Yeah.
Education, nutrition, health, and a more stimulating environment. Poor governance basically stalls or reverses the Flynn effect.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, let's talk education specifics. How does India's education system generally compare to the systems in the nations it's brightest, often migrate to like the US, Canada, UK, Germany?
Well, generally, India's system, particularly at the mass level, consistently ranks lower on international comparisons. It's often criticized for focusing heavily on rote learning and memorization over critical thinking and problem solving. There are issues with infrastructure, resources, and research funding outside of the elite institutions like the IITs. Curricula can be quite rigid compared to the more flexible systems in many Western countries. This quality gap is, frankly, a major driver of the brain drain.
And China's system, how does that stack up against India's and against the G7 nations?
China's system far outpaces India's on most metrics. More top-ranked universities globally, higher overall literacy rates, near universal primary enrollment. Compared to the G7, it's more complex.
Oh, so?
Chinese students consistently excel in international assessments like PISA, especially in math, reading, and science. They often outperform students from G7 nations in these foundational areas, reflecting a very rigorous system. However, critics often point to potential deficits in fostering critical thinking, creativity, and academic freedom compared to Western systems.
Okay, let's look at a specific test. The GRE, often used for grad school admissions worldwide. How do Indian and Chinese students typically score compared to students from G7 nations?
It's quite revealing. Chinese students consistently achieve the highest average quantitative scores globally, often in the high 160s out of 170. This reflects that rigorous math education from an early age.
Impressive. And India?
Indian students also score very well quantitatively, generally higher than G7 averages, but typically a bit lower than Chinese students, maybe in the low to mid-150s on average, though with a wide range.
And the G7 nations?
Students from G7 nations generally have lower average quantitative scores compared to both China and India. However, they tend to significantly outperform both Indian and Chinese students on the verbal reasoning and analytical writing sections.
Why the difference there?
Likely due to native English language proficiency for many G7 students, and perhaps educational systems that place a stronger emphasis on essay writing, textual analysis, and constructing arguments.
Interesting trade-offs. Now, you mentioned math proficiency. Does that generally correlate with critical thinking skills?
Yes, there's generally a strong positive correlation acknowledged in educational psychology.
How does math help critical thinking?
Well, math inherently builds skills in systematic problem solving, logical reasoning, identifying patterns, abstraction, and analytical thinking. It trains the mind to approach problems in a structured, rigorous way, which is a core component of critical thinking.
That connects nicely to computing. Thinking back to the early days of digital computing, what skills were most critical then, and how has that changed with the rise of AI?
Oh, the early days were heavily reliant on mathematical and logical reasoning. The pioneers Turing, von Neumann, they were essentially mathematicians and logicians. You needed to understand the fundamental logic gates, the algorithms at a deep mathematical level.
And now with AI?
The shift is significant. It's less about the low-level mathematical implementation for many users and developers and more interdisciplinary. You still need logic, but it's shifted towards understanding probability, statistics, handling vast amounts of data, abstraction.
Less how to code, more what and why.
Exactly. It's less about the mechanics of coding the algorithm from scratch and more about understanding what problems AI can solve, why you'd use a particular approach, how to frame the problem for the AI, and crucially, having the domain expertise in the area where AI is being applied, medicine, finance, art, whatever. The context and the why have become much more important.
Got it. Let's look at investment now. Our sources highlight a pretty stark contrast in R&D spending. South Asian nations seem to be among the lowest spenders as a percentage of GDP, while East Asian nations like South Korea and Japan, plus Israel and even Qatar, top the charts. Why? Is it cultural values or back to that debunked DNA IQ thing?
Definitely not DNA or IQ. Let's put that aside. It's primarily driven by two interconnected factors: stage of economic development and conscious political will. R&D is expensive and often has long-term payoffs. Nations that have reached a higher level of economic development, like those East Asian tigers or Israel, have more resources to invest. But just as importantly, they've made R&D a core part of their national strategy. They see it as essential for future competitiveness. Governments and private sectors in those countries invest heavily because it's a political and economic priority.
And South Asia?
South Asian nations generally have lower per capita GDP, so historically, the focus has understandably been on more immediate needs: poverty reduction, basic infrastructure, primary education. R&D, while important, often takes a back seat when resources are scarce.
Are there cultural factors too?
Yes, potentially. Some sources suggest East Asian cultures might place a stronger societal emphasis on STEM education and achievement. In South Asia, perhaps more risk aversion in business or more rigid academic and corporate structures might sometimes hinder the kind of dynamic R&D ecosystem seen in top spending nations, which often thrive on flexibility and merit-based competition.
So connecting this back, India producing more MBAs than the STEM scientists, is that a direct reflection of these cultural attitudes, maybe from policymakers and businesses?
Yes, I think that's a very fair assessment. Historically, policymakers in India often favored generalist administrators over technical specialists for government roles. In the business world, especially in the era of the license Raj and protected markets, success often depended more on navigating regulations, sales networks, and finance rather than pure technological innovation.
So the incentives favored the MBA route.
Exactly. An MBA was widely perceived and often was a faster, more reliable path to high-paying management jobs, social mobility, and influence. This created that very prominent engineer to MBA pipeline, where even bright engineers saw management as the ultimate career goal rather than staying in technical R&D roles. The perceived rewards were skewed. Hashtag the innovation imperative and future outlook.
Okay, let's zoom out again to the global stage. The U.S. and China. How exactly did China manage to rise so rapidly to essentially match the USA as a major economic and increasingly military power on the world stage?
Well, it certainly wasn't accidental. It was a very deliberate, long-term national strategy, really kicking off in the late 1970s.
What were the key elements?
Economically, it started with Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening up in 1978, shifting, cautiously at first, towards a market-oriented economy. They leveraged their massive population for low-cost manufacturing, attracting huge foreign investment. They set up special economic zones like Shenzhen.
Right.
Crucially, they invested massively in infrastructure, ports, railways, power to support this export machine. And this process lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, creating a vast internal market too.
And the military side.
That modernization drive really accelerated after the 1991 Gulf War, which showed China how far behind they were technologically. They began pouring money into their military, focusing specifically on developing cutting-edge technologies. Think hypersonic missiles, stealth aircraft, aircraft carriers aimed directly at countering U.S. military dominance, particularly in Asia.
So why hasn't the USA been able to match that rate of progress, particularly economically, in recent decades?
It boils down to some pretty fundamental differences between the two countries.
Right.
First, political systems. China's centralized authoritarian system can enact policy and mobilize resources with incredible speed, bypassing the debates and checks and balances inherent in the U.S. democratic system, which is naturally slower and more deliberative.
Okay, system difference. What else?
Second, there's stages of economic development. China, for much of this period, was experiencing catch-up growth. It could grow rapidly simply by adopting existing technologies and manufacturing processes from more advanced economies. That's inherently faster. The USA, being a mature economy already at the technological frontier, has to grow primarily through innovation, inventing the next new thing, which is a much slower, harder process.
Makes sense. Catching up is easier than leading.
Exactly. And finally, national priorities. China's leadership explicitly prioritized rapid economic growth, sometimes arguably at the expense of individual freedoms or environmental concerns. The U.S. system has to balance a much broader range of priorities: individual liberties, environmental regulations, a free press, social issues which can sometimes constrain the pace of purely economic or infrastructural development compared to a state-led, single-party system focused primarily on growth and power.
Okay, shifting focus slightly. Has U.S. productivity growth actually slowed down over the past 20 years or so?
Yes, the data shows a significant slowdown in productivity growth since the mid-2000s compared to the boom years of the late 90s and early 2000s driven by the ICT revolution.
Why the slowdown?
The explanations are debated, but common factors cited include diminishing returns from those initial waves of information and communication technology, possibly reduced business dynamism, meaning fewer startups, challenging incumbents, and maybe uneven diffusion of innovation across different sectors of the economy.
Is this slowdown also happening in the UK and the EU?
Yes, and in many cases, it's arguably even more pronounced there. The UK has faced issues like chronic underinvestment, uncertainty related to Brexit, and persistent skills mismatches. The EU often struggles with lagging digital adoption compared to the US, regulatory fragmentation despite the single market ideal, and generally weaker business dynamism in many member states.
So, for these established Western economies, the US, UK, EU, could this be a case of market success breeds market inertia? Does past success make it harder to stay dynamic?
Yes, I think that's a really powerful and relevant explanation for a lot of what we're seeing.
How does that play out?
Well, in the US, you see the rise of incredibly dominant tech companies.
Yeah.
While innovative themselves, their sheer scale might make it harder for new entrants to challenge them, potentially leading to less competition and a slower overall rate of disruptive innovation across the economy. Less entrepreneurial churn.
In the UK and EU?
There, it might be more about an entrenched business culture in some sectors that's perhaps more risk-averse, focused on stability and incremental improvements, rather than disruptive leaps. Complex regulatory environments, while often well-intentioned, can also sometimes inadvertently create barriers for innovative startups. The deep dive takeaway here: past success, if it leads to complacency or structures that inhibit new challengers, can absolutely become a straitjacket, slowing future progress.
Right. How are the East Asian powerhouses, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, faring in terms of productivity growth? Are they immune?
No, they're not immune. They're also grappling with slowing productivity growth, but often with their own distinct set of challenges on top of the global trends. Japan is facing a really severe demographic crisis, an aging, shrinking population, which inherently puts downward pressure on growth. South Korea deals with high levels of household debt and an economy heavily dominated by a few large conglomerates, the K-bulls, which can sometimes stifle smaller innovators. Taiwan is incredibly successful, but faces risks from its extreme reliance on the semiconductor industry. And Singapore, while highly advanced, is dealing with the challenges of being a mature economy and relies heavily on foreign labor. So yes, they're all facing headwinds too.
Okay, let's reconnect this to branding, something we touched on earlier. Thinking about Silicon Valley's big IT giants, Google, Apple, Meta, etc., what's their core model? Is it fundamentally about their ability to sell, marketing, perception, or their ability to innovate, product, tech? And how are they holding up against challengers like China's Huawei or AI disruptors like DeepSeek?
I'd say Silicon Valley historically follows a hybrid model, but the foundation is absolutely innovation. Their ability to sell, their brand power is overwhelmingly built on that technological innovation and product experience.
The product is the brand.
To a large extent, yes. Think Google search, the iPhone. The user experience, the functionality, that's the core. They monetize that experience and they reinvest massively in R&D to stay ahead. But they are facing unprecedented challenges now. Companies like Huawei are formidable competitors, not just in phones, but across a whole ecosystem, with vertical integration, their own OS, their own chips, often heavily backed by state R&D. And then you have AI players like DeepSeek, pushing aggressively with open source models, challenging the cost structures and performance benchmarks of the established players. Innovation is absolutely no longer a Silicon Valley monopoly. The game has changed.
Are U.S. policymakers and the education system aware of this intense competition? Are they taking concrete actions?
Oh, extremely cognizant. There's actually strong bipartisan consensus in the U.S. now about the need to bolster national competitiveness, particularly in STEM fields and advanced technology.
What kinds of actions?
Well, on the policy front, you have major legislation like the GAPS and Science Act, huge investment aimed at boosting domestic semiconductor manufacturing, increasing federal R&D funding for AI, quantum computing, biotech, and so on. There are also targeted export controls aimed at slowing China's access to certain critical technologies.
And in education.
We talked about these STEM-designated MBA programs earlier. There's also a growing emphasis on specialized degrees and certificates in areas like product management. Plus, more government-industry partnerships trying to develop the specific tech workforce skills needed. So yes, there's definitely awareness and action, though whether it's enough or fast enough is the big question.
Do the spending patterns of U.S. businesses reflect this, specifically looking at advertising to sales ratios versus R&D spending?
Yes, you see a pretty clear divergence. Many traditional industries, think pharmaceuticals, consumer packaged goods, Sting often spends significantly more on advertising and marketing as a percentage of sales than they do on R&D. Their model relies heavily on brand building and perception management.
But tech is different.
Very different. The big tech giants, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, generally spend far, far more on R&D than they do on traditional advertising. For them, the product performance, the features, the user experience, that is the primary marketing tool. R&D is their core investment in future sales. It reflects that fundamental difference: value creation through innovation versus value capture through marketing.
So, given this shift towards product and performance, what does that mean for the future of Madison Avenue? The traditional advertising industry and its mass media partners, are they dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs, no, I don't think so. But facing radical transformation, absolutely. It's not obsolescence, it's evolution, maybe even revolution.
How so?
The era of the mass media monopoly is clearly over. Audiences are fragmented across countless digital channels. People skip ads, use ad blockers. And as we said, the product itself or the platform often becomes the primary marketing channel.
So what's the new role for agencies?
It's shifting dramatically. Towards performance marketing, highly data-driven campaigns focus directly on measurable ROI, like conversions and sales. Towards building trust and authenticity, managing brand reputation, purpose-driven marketing, navigating social media engagement, and crucially, towards much deeper cross-functional integration, working hand in glove with product development teams, engineering teams, data science teams. It's a massive shift from the old Mad Men creative focus to needing math men, data analysts, strategists, technologists.
And is that changing how marketing success is measured? Is it moving away from fuzzy things like awareness towards hard metrics like sales in terms of accountability?
Definitely. The old model relied heavily on proxies,
Right.
brand recall surveys, impressions, reach, metrics that were hard to directly tie to the bottom line.
Right.
The new model, especially in the digital age, demands direct accountability. Metrics like return on ad spend, ROAS, customer acquisition costs, CAC, conversion rate. These directly measure the financial impact of marketing activities.
Yeah.
It's much more results-oriented.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think of a classic campaign like Nike's Just Do It. Brilliant for building long-term brand awareness and equity. Compare that to, say, Warby Parker running highly targeted digital ads. They can track exactly how many clicks led to glasses purchases, calculating a precise ROAS. Both have value, but the emphasis and accountability are shifting towards the latter, performance-based approach.
How do branding practices in China and maybe East Asia reflect this shift towards performance and integration?
They're often even more integrated and technologically advanced in some ways, especially around e-commerce.
Like what?
Social commerce and live stream selling are huge. Platforms like Taobao Live or Douyin, TikTok's counterpart, directly link entertainment, influencer branding, and immediate quantifiable sales in a single experience. It's incredibly effective.
So branding and selling are collapsed.
In many cases, yes. And data-driven branding is paramount. They build trust through superior app experiences, seamless logistics, personalized recommendations. The product and platform are the brand for giants like Alibaba or Tencent. They use data and AI for precision targeting and user experience optimization on a massive scale.
Okay, one last branding question. Influencers. We hear so much about them. Are social media influencers actually considered trustworthy by U.S. consumers? It feels like a really mixed bag.
It is complex and often skeptical. Some surveys show a majority, maybe 60–70%, say they trust recommendations from influencers they follow, sometimes more than traditional ads.
Right.
But other data shows a significant trust deficit compared to, say, general advertising or reviews from actual customers. Trust seems highly dependent on the perceived authenticity and transparency of the influencer. If it feels too commercial, or if sponsored posts aren't clearly disclosed, that trust erodes very quickly. Younger demographics tend to be more influenced, but also perhaps more savvy at spotting inauthenticity. It's definitely not blind trust.
Makes sense. Okay, let's end on a slightly more technical note, linking back to automation. Early robotics in mass production, like on automotive assembly lines, was that a form of AI?
No, not really. There were distinct fields back then. Those early industrial robots were essentially pre-programmed machines. Very sophisticated for their time, but not intelligent. They executed specific repetitive tasks exactly as programmed. Early AI, conversely, was focused on trying to simulate human cognitive abilities, reasoning, learning, problem-solving. The fields only really started converging much later.
Got it. So can robotics merged with AI actually fulfill that promise of changing mass production into true mass customization?
Yes, fundamentally, this is one of the most exciting frontiers. AI acts as the brain, and modern robotics acts as the muscle.
How does that work?
AI can take customer input, run generative design algorithms to create unique product variations, optimize the supply chain for custom orders, predict demand. And robotics provides the flexible, adaptable manufacturing capability. Robots equipped with sensors, vision systems, and AI control can handle variations, perform intricate tasks with precision, and adapt to different product configurations on the fly.
Are there examples of this happening now?
Absolutely. The automotive industry uses it for selecting custom features. Apparel and footwear are big areas. Think Adidas's Speed Factories or Nike by You, offering personalized designs, or brands like Ishakti offering custom-fit clothing based on measurements. Even consumer electronics. Dell's pioneering build-to-order PC model was an early form of this. AI and robotics are taking it to a whole new level of sophistication and scale.
It's interesting, actually. Panasonic had a system back in 1987, their bicycle order system, POS. It blended skilled human craftsmanship with automation to offer something like 8 million variations, delivered in 2 weeks. A real pioneer.
Wow, 1987. That's incredibly prescient. It shows the desire for customization has been there a long time. AI and robotics are just making it feasible on a much broader scale now.
And just to clarify, those famous Hong Kong tailoring shops known for mass customization, that was all human skill, right? Not robotics.
Oh, absolutely. That was pure human expertise, highly skilled tailors working incredibly efficiently with well-organized logistics. A different kind of marvel, based on human capital, not automation.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive today. We've really journeyed through these intricate connections, haven't we? Technological leaps, global economic chess games, the role of political systems, and really the fundamental nature of how we create value and build brands in this, well, rapidly changing world.
Indeed. It's fascinating how that consistent thread runs through almost everything we discussed. This imperative of product-led innovation, the critical importance of genuinely creating new value, not just shuffling around or capturing existing value. That seems to be the defining shift for nations, for companies, for individuals.
So the big question left hanging, perhaps. As AI is redefining our jobs, our roles, and as global powers continue to vie for technological and economic leadership, how do societies navigate that balance? The balance between pushing for efficiency and innovation and upholding fundamental values like freedom, equity, human connection.
That is the question.
And maybe, what part will you listening now play in shaping that balance? Something to think about.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you plenty to chew on.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.